I want to welcome everybody to the 4 Esoterics. We're 3.5 right now. We're expecting one more at about in a few minutes. Ben, why don't you tell us where people can find the 4 Esoterics?
Well, you can find us on Twitter at numeral 4 Esoterics. That's ESOTERICS. And of course, visit us at American Greatness, www.amgreatness.com.
They could also download us off of iTunes and go to YouTube. And that's 4 Esoterics. And one of the things we're here obviously with Louis Madman Fine, Ben Boychuk, and Ben Burgess Meredith Boychuk today.
There we go.
And we are entering into the 5th dimension, which is known as the Twilight Zone, a show that's about 60 years old at this point.
That's right. First season was 1959.
So, and what's amazing too is that they actually did sometimes when you look at older shows, you'll notice they only lasted 5 seasons. The big reason for that is because they did 36 episodes a year.
Yeah.
And it's a show, you could rarely say a show that 60 years ago was relevant is as relevant as it is today.
Yes. It certainly holds up. It's not, and it holds up in a way that appeals to creative types because it's come back as a series 4 times now.
I know there was one in the 80s that Lewis loved.
There was one in the 80s. There was one in the 90s.
That was the Forrest Whitaker, and now the Peel guy is trying it.
Right.
He's actually doing it.
Right.
But you know what I realized is as I was I was Googling favorite episodes, there's a top 50 list. And I realized it was a very politically written article about how it relates to, they were putting the political spin on it, which is so opposed to what I think Rod Serling's intention ever was. His intentions was no matter what party you were in, you could take what you want from my episode.
Serling was a liberal Democrat bordering on socialist.
Yeah.
Who was afraid of the world coming to an end, I think. And I think those episodes, I think that show works in part because I think there was probably more of a cultural consensus at the time, much more so than there is now. But I don't, I think it may have just been it was just a different America. And so, when Jordan Peele is doing his stuff today, and it's a much more divided America, and even though he's trying to remake some of those classic episodes for contemporary times, I just don't know that it works.
Well, because he can't help but not. Serling was amazing at being even-handed. Most writers of sci-fi today can't help themselves in spewing a political message.
Or that they were just better at it.
Right. They don't have the ability. I mean, There was only one Rod Serling.
I think that there's also a component of, is your audience mature enough and have the intelligence to be able to decipher those very subtle messages that the original Twilight Zone had? Right. I think there was so much left up to the imagination in that time period because of censors and things they could and couldn't say on TV. Whereas today, you can pretty much say whatever you want and find a medium that will take you. So I think things are just too on the nose today that people may not be able to pick up those references.
I think what's amazing, by the way, and Lewis, if you can name 5 of them, I will be very impressed. The show
I just want to say something here because and kudos to Ben, who is, because we're doing this, I say live streaming, it's being recorded, but we're witnesses to his live performance as an homage to the Twilight Zone, that lost episode where the main character raided a Goodwill dumpster and outfitted himself in whatever clothes he could find, and then saw the public's reaction to his appearance in sweats and a hoodie, and how no matter how learned he was or is, the public reaction to that. And I also would congratulate him on successfully winning that eBay auction for the plaster of Paris skull or bust that he has in front of his 27 Touras.
Louis Fine, everybody. So can you name Louis or Ben? It had 12 Oscar-winning actors that appeared in the show, future or present.
Louis, go.
So I have a confession to make, because, again, for people that will be watching this show, we're coming to you from the past and your future. I want to say something. So since between that broadcast and now, say anywhere from 7 to 15 phone calls by Yeshua asking me about my favorite episodes from the Twilight Zone, and he would say things like, "Do you remember the one with the," and then the guy, and they said, and there was that family, and I would say, yeah, it was great. It was great. Now I have a confession to make. I didn't watch the show. So I'm only familiar with about 4 episodes, and the 4 episodes that everyone else has seen.
Okay, cut the audio. Cut the audio. But Ben, can you actually name any of the 12 the Oscar-winning actors in the show?
I don't think I can.
I'm just going to name a few: Lee Marvin, Martin Balsam, Cliff Robertson, Gig Young, Cloris Leachman, Art Carney, Robert Duvall, Martin Landau, James Coburn, Robert Redford, and Sidney Pollack.
Wow.
What did Lee Marvin win an Oscar for?
That is a great question that I figured you, being King Esoteric, would know.
I don't think he won an Oscar.
Lee Marvin did win an Oscar.
Look that up.
That's what Google says. Welcome, the 4th Esoteric, Chris Buzzkirk.
Hello.
And Louis, while you were gone, Chris, Louis admitted you at least watched the Twilight Zone 40 years ago. Louis has admitted to only watching 4 episodes.
All right. And not in their entirety. Now, as a kid, my exposure to the Twilight Zone was the new Twilight Zone. And in reading about it last night, I was amazed, on the one hand, about the bevy of writers, including Harlan Ellison,
yes,
Stephen King, Richard Matheson, and directors such as
John Landis.
Well, that's the film, which also included Wes Craven and Joe Dante. But in watching the new Twilight Zone as a kid, I was exposed to the 3 episodes I remember. One with John Glover playing an alien.
I thought you said it was Crispin Glover.
No, it's John Glover.
Okay.
John Glover, who and they spent a lot on makeup to make him look like an alien. They just said, "Go." So he comes to the UN with UFOs, the alien ships hovering overhead, and all the representatives of the nations of the world come together to achieve peace, given the ultimatum by Glover, who says,
and I'm guessing it didn't work.
No, they achieve peace, only to find out, in the ironic spirit of the Twilight Zone, that no, Glover and his alien confederates will destroy Earth. They have come here because Earth is too peaceful.
Again, that's a very, by the way, just a critique of the times. Different writers. I bet you, if you watch that show now, you would see a political slant in that show. Right.
Well, you wouldn't have a Soviet Union.
What are the other 2?
The other is the Box and the Button, which you told me is a remake.
I almost believe it is, but I could be wrong.
The guy gives the woman this box, but if she presses the button, someone somewhere will die. And the other one is some dystopian society where people are branded, where they have this red dot that's affixed to them that they can't conceal. Even if they were to put a hat on, it would burn a hole through it. So they're pariahs. And in one of the scenes, the branded person sits down at a lunch counter with a blind man or woman and engages in conversation, only to have the blind person told by others that this is that man or woman is persona non grata, and she gets up and leaves.
So Ben, by the way, wouldn't you say every single episode he's mentioned is basically a remake of the past episodes, just a different like tilt on it?
I think so.
Because remember the cornfields episode with that kid that was just evil. You know,
that's Billy Mummy. Yeah.
Yeah. If he didn't like you, Lewis, he would just like think, and you'd be off.
Which they remade in the movie.
Yes,
they remade it, and they actually did a follow-up in the 90s.
Yeah.
There were two others very quickly. One is the Thing with Two Heads with Rosie Greer and Ray Milland, which is probably my favorite episode.
Go on.
And finally, as I told Moshiach when he called me last week, I said, and this is true. You don't have to watch the Twilight Zone to say this and believe it, because it is true. The best Twilight Zone ever written by Rod Serling is The Planet of the Apes, because he did the screen adaptation for the first one. And I would argue that's the greatest Twilight Zone episode that never was.
Thank you, Lewis. Fine. And we are the Four Esoterics. I want to remind everybody we are being recorded, and we will be releasing this via podcast. So if you're here, we are recording. We follow Carlin's rules. And everybody, please be dressed. And with that, we're going to go to our first break with Ben Boychuk. Take us out.
Well, I just wanted to put in a quick 30-second plug for American Greatness. www.amgreatness.com, where you will get every day, you'll get 7 days a week, the best commentary and reporting on the American scene as it is unfolding right now. This is an election year, probably the most important election year ever. And you're not going to learn anything about it worth knowing unless you're reading American Greatness writers like Julie Kelly, Victor Davis Hanson, Conrad Black, the great Edward Ring, all of it at www.amgreatness.com.
And Chris Buzzkirk, who wrote an amazing piece the other day. And
I'm just noticing poor Ben doesn't get a break.
And well,
I don't. I barely sleep.
And if you noticed, his homage to the Twilight Zone is his Burgess Meredith statue in the background. I want to welcome everybody back to the Four Esoterics. We are discussing, for the most part today, the Twilight Zone, its impact it had. And I know, Ben, for you especially, it really did have a significant impact on your life and the way you view things.
I loved the show, and I loved it in part because my mother loved the show and introduced me to the show. And so in a weird way, I learned of the stories by her telling them to me before I even saw the episodes. So, but I just wanted to elaborate on something that Lewis said before the break. Well, what I really wanted to say is put in a good word for those early 1980s Twilight Zone, that series, which I think lasted a couple of seasons. There was one in particular that really, if we were to do a top five of from that series, it would be harder to do. But one in particular was called Wordplay, and it was directed by Wes Craven. It starred Robert Klein, Annie Potts, and the great Robert Downey Sr. But it was about a man, Klein, who wakes up one day and his wife, they're having a casual conversation, and his wife just happens to say something odd. She says, they're just having a normal conversation, and just one little word she throws in that's a little bit strange. Then he goes to work, and he's heading off to lunch, and somebody says, hey, where's a good place to go for dinosaur? And by the end of the episode, everybody is talking in gibberish, at least to him. And the last scene of the episode is he goes into his son's room, who's just a toddler, and he picks up a book, and it's one of these little ABC books, and he has to learn the language all over again. And there's a picture of a dog, and it has the word Wednesday next to it. And I've always remembered that episode. It's very strange, very disturbing, and really well done.
If you look at the old Twilight Zone episodes, some were extremely dark, some were extremely light, and some were extremely thought-provoking, and most of them all the same.
Right.
But your top pick is Time Enough at Last.
Yeah.
Which is one of the most classic episodes.
Right. And that was the one that my mother told me about before I even saw. And it's the one it's Burgess Meredith is a man named Henry Bemis, based on a short story, and which a lot of those were, by the way. A lot of the episodes were adapted for television from science fiction stories that appeared in magazines that were very popular at the time. But it's about a man who just wants to read, and he works at a bank. Right. Yeah.
We keep on losing your visual, Chris.
I think
some people think that's a feature.
Right. Yeah. He doesn't. We don't want to see him rolling his eyes.
Get back to that episode, because I believe this is actually an episode they should show in every school. They show the other one, but this with the pig face. But this one with Burgess Meredith should be shown in every school.
So all he wants to do is read, and unlike the short story, which is cruel in its own way, everybody in the episode is sort of arrayed against him. I mean, his wife takes his books and blacks out all of the lines in his books, which is particularly vile. And his boss at the bank doesn't care if he wants to read. He just wants him to do his job and stop short-changing customers. Well, so he goes. He spends his lunchtime in the bank vault in the basement, and one day there's a tremendous explosion. It's an atomic bomb has gone off, and the world has ended. And he emerges from this rubble, and he's the last man on Earth, and spends days, I think, walking around trying to explore, trying to find any sign of life. And he's lonely and bereft. And just as he's about to kill himself, he just happens to almost commit suicide when he notices he's right next to the public library, and he's elated and spends some unknown period of time finding all these books that he can read, and he lays them out, and he has years worth of reading that he can do. And just as he's settling down to read these books, his thick glasses fall off his face. They break, and he's unable to see. And so he's left in this world where he had all the time in the world to read, and he can't read. And
and what I find odd about that episode, which is a great episode, is you weren't thinking it at the time. I'm sure if he continued walking, he could have found another pair of glasses.
Four quick things.
Yeah.
Judah, give it another day, and I think that pineapple will be ripe. So you don't want to leave it out on the shelf too long. Secondly, congratulations to Ben for keeping one of his keeping a souvenir from one of his victims, the family photo that he took out of somebody's wallet that is now in front of.
No, it came with the frame.
Right. And thirdly, another of my favorite Twilight Zone episodes, the one where James Woods goes to see Alan King goes to see Alan King to stop smoking. And
I remember that. That was the Zippo. Was that the Zippo episode?
That is,
No, I'm making a joke. It's from the film Cat's
Ah.
Eye.
yeah, it's not. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Thank you, Louis.
But I want to. But seriously, from a book called "Everything I Need to Know I Learned in the Twilight Zone," which has an introduction from Rod Serling's daughter, and she provides an excerpt from a short story, First Squad, First Platoon. He wrote this when he was 19, and I just want to share the excerpt with you, or an excerpt of the excerpt.
In 30 seconds or less, because this is.
I challenge anyone to show me a 19-year-old today writing like this. Quote, "I'm dedicating my little story to you. Doubtless you will be among the very few who will ever read it. It seems war stories aren't very well received at this point. I'm told they're outdated, untimely, and as might be expected, make some unpleasant reading. And as you have no doubt already perceived, human beings don't like to remember unpleasant things. They gird themselves with the armor of wishful thinking, protect themselves with a shield of impenetrable optimism, and, with a few exceptions, seem to accomplish their forgetting quite admirably."
That's amazing for a 19-year-old. Ben,
That's pretty good for 40.
Yeah, that's pretty good
Right.
for 80.
Right.
And it's you're right. It's that was his daughter, you said.
That was his daughter sharing this a short story he wrote when he was 19 in the Pacific Theater.
But again, it's amazing. Even at the age of 19, he was so vague. His points get through, but without beating you up when he did it. Ben, let's get to your second episode, because this can be considered a very political episode.
Yeah, and it is a political episode.
Yeah,
and it's one of the more libertarian episodes, which is the obsolete man, and again. This is a Burgess Meredith, another Burgess Meredith episode about a man who's it's taking place in some future society where there's a totalitarian government that decides whether you're efficient or worthy or not of living. And here again, Meredith is playing. He's playing a librarian in it, a guy named Wordsworth, and he's brought before this tribunal where he's judged obsolete, because in this futuristic totalitarian society, there's no need for books anymore. And so he's told that he's got 48 hours to live. He asks for a personal assassin. And he wants to be executed.
Who doesn't?
On television. What's that, Chris?
Who doesn't? Who doesn't?
Well, I know.
Well, that's
Right.
like the people that would choose
Whole
a
premise
firing.
behind Craigslist.
But that's like the people that would choose a firing squad as a way of getting murdered, as a way of, when they're on death row.
And
Right.
Jeremiah, you were right. Lee Marvin did win the Academy Award for Best Actor for portraying gunfighter Kid Shalene and criminal Tim Strawn. Lee Marvin.
In what movie? Just say the movie.
I don't.
Okay, so you found out the facts of the movie he won the Oscar,
Look, I don't.
but not the
I
actual
don't
movie.
run Wikipedia.
Yeah, thank you, Louis. But getting back to Ben, when you find out the movie, okay, so the obsolete man is
Yeah. So what happens is he chooses, it's basically the chancellor, the one who's judged him obsolete, appears at Wordsworth's apartment to carry out his execution, or to see to it that he's killed. And he's locked in with Wordsworth. It's revealed that there's a bomb that's going to explode. And what happens is, in moments before this bomb is supposed to go off, the chancellor begs for mercy and cries out for God, which in this futuristic society, there is no God. So so in the seconds before the bomb is supposed to explode, The chancellor is allowed to escape. The bomb goes off. Wordsworth is killed, content to go, but having exposed the chancellor's cowardice. In the end, he's declared obsolete as well, and so it's another one of those great.
Okay, so I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So your first two episodes, I have a belief that people find their episodes the favorites, ones they could relate to or identify. So you pick two episodes where you identify with an obsolete man.
Well, no, in the first one, well, sure, okay. The first one,
he's as obsolete as they come.
He's the last man.
So you find yourself the last man and the obsolete man.
I find myself
man.
I find myself identifying with Burgess Meredith.
Yeah.
and nerdy readers.
What's amazing is he never won an Oscar.
Yeah.
Chris, you missed it. We were naming all the 12 there were 12 Oscar winners that had starred in the show. And
wow.
Yeah, I mean, literally, and Lewis is still looking up the Lee Marvin movie.
Right.
Hopefully by the end of the show, we will know that.
Point Blank is a great Lee Marvin movie.
Yes,
Delta
it
Force
is.
is a great Lee Marvin movie. But let's get back to it. So A New Place to Visit, Nothing in the Dark, and 22.
So Nice Place to Visit. A nice place to, I'm going to go through these very quickly. Nice Place to Visit is about the crook, the burglar who dies and thinks he goes to heaven, and it turns out he didn't go to heaven.
Yeah.
Nothing in the Dark is the famous one with Robert Redford as Death. There's a woman who's barricaded herself in her home. And then there's a man.
He wasn't in 99% of the episode, right? All you heard
right. He's outside the door.
All you heard was his voice.
That's right. He's outside the door. Yeah. There's a gunfight. He says he's a police officer, that he's been shot. He needs help. She's barricaded in her door, in her apartment, and she finally lets him in, and he's Death. And then the last one that I picked was an episode called 22, which I don't think is all that well known, but it's notable for being one of the first television shows that was recorded on videotape, as opposed
Gunfight?
to what?
The gunfight, the gunslinger?
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm talking about this particular episode of the Twilight Zone. It was in I think it was in the second season, second or third. I think it was the second. It's notable because it's about this woman. She's in a hospital. She has a dream where she wanders down to the basement of this hospital to the morgue, which was, I think, room 22.
Yeah, it was a very famous actress, by the way.
Yeah, and the nurse opens the door to the morgue and says, "Room for one more, honey." And then she screams and runs away. And then at the end of the episode, she's about to get on a plane, and the stewardess is the same woman who was the nurse and says, "Room for one more, honey." And she screams, and she doesn't get on the airplane. And then the plane goes up and it explodes in midair, and it's really creepy and cool.
Okay, so
yeah.
you like obsolete and women going to morgues and dying on the plane at the end of an episode.
Not dying.
Oh,
not dying.
Not dying. And on that note, you are listening to the 4 Esoterics. We are recording live, and we are going to take a 30-second Ben Boychik advertising break.
So I'm going to put in a good word for Stone Creek Bistro. Stone Creek Bistro in Blue Jay, California, run by my friend Chef Sam Perry, who just sold his 1,000th fried chicken sandwich. Stone Creek Bistro has been surviving and thriving through the apocalypse with quarantine comfort food. When everything opens back up again in California, and you're in Southern California, come to the mountains and visit Stone Creek Bistro. In the meantime, you can find them online at www.stonecreekbistro.com.
You didn't name any of the sandwiches that were...
I only mentioned the famous one, which is the fried chicken.
No, but I thought there was a quarantine name sandwich.
There's a quarantine cheeseburger. There's apocalypse fries.
There you are.
There's and there's a fantastic barbecue brisket sandwich that comes and goes that tastes like magic. I mean, I actually like it even maybe a little bit better than the chicken sandwich.
Okay, can I
But
just
don't
share
tell
something
Sam
funny?
that I said
Chris, I don't know if he's Lewis, and I don't know if he sent you pictures. He doesn't send you pictures of the meal before. He sends of an empty plate.
Yeah, I think that's effective advertising.
I think that is one of the classic. That is the greatest like form for a restaurant. Stop showing me a full plate. Show me the empty plate.
That's how good it was.
Yeah.
I just want to make.
If Ben was a porn director, his whole video would just be an empty bed.
Yeah, or a woman's face. But so I
Yeah, quick point because we want to get a Chris. Go.
because it was for the most part a failure. I'll put that in quotes. The new Twilight Zone. Again, listen to this lineup of writers, some of whom I mentioned before: Harlan Ellison, George R.R. Martin. They had and Stephen King, directors Wes Craven, Billy Friedkin.
This was for the one in the 80s?
Yes, actors included Bruce Willis, Helen Mirren, Morgan Freeman, Martin Landau, Jonathan Frakes, Fred Savage, and Susan Hubley.
Susan Hubley was don't know why I know this, but Whip Hubley's sister or brother. It was like there was a Kurt Russell connection. And Lewis
was married to Kurt Russell.
He was married to Kurt Russell. Chris, did you do any homework and watch any Twilight Zone episode? Or are we just going back on memory for 40 years?
I don't think we need to delve too far deeply into that question.
Did you enjoy Tropic Thunder?
I love Tropic Thunder.
Thank you.
That was
that's the film Tom Cruise. Everybody talks about Tom Cruise. That's a Tom Cruise role he should have won an Oscar for.
I 100% agree with you.
I agree, and I say this as a Tom Cruise. What would be the opposite of fan? Critic. He was great in that movie. It's
remarkable.
It's his best. I would say best movie since Risky Business.
Okay, so I want to get I want to get producer girlfriend in because she has a couple episodes that I think are extremely relevant, not to today as far as what we're going through, but as far as going to Mars or going back to the moon. So, producer girlfriend, what are your couple episodes?
Well, I think it's funny that you said that you are basically a reflection of the Twilight Zone episodes that you enjoy. So I guess here's my stab at it.
That's a great point. Lewis brought up the one with two heads.
The thing with two heads.
So go on.
Ray Milland and Rosie Greer.
Yeah.
My favorite episode debuted on October 2nd, 1959 on CBS, and it's called Where Is Everybody? I'm not going to go through the plot because I want you to actually go and watch it, but it's the very first Twilight Zone episode ever. And why I was moved by this episode is as we continue to push forth space flight hardware, and as we prepare to go to Mars, I keep bringing up this question to society of think about what type of people we're sending to Mars and what they're going to have to deal with when they get to a planet where there is no one else. And this particular episode touches on that. It's
Which
about a man.
Which actually does resonate to today because people are going nuts with the quarantine. The idea of quarantining on Mars.
It's just not in human nature to not socialize. I mean, and that is something that we're definitely going through today. So if we're sending two people who are willingly wanting to go to another planet, what does that say about that person who's representing all of Earth's humanity? And essentially, essentially this episode, the very first episode, dives into that. The mentality, the fear, the horror of being that only person in a place where no one else lives is extremely scary. And so that particular episode really kind of hit hard for me. And maybe you should watch it during quarantine. Maybe you shouldn't. I'm not sure now that we're talking about it.
I would just send condemned prisoners because.
Okay, so go to my list. And that was actually an episode called The Lonely, with actor Jack Warden getting sent to prison on, what was it, Ben? On Mars or on the moon? We lost your audio, Ben. And
Can you hear me now? It was an
yeah,
asteroid.
he was sent to and the prison guard that came to visit him,
Right.
you know, he brought him a box, and inside the box, he would play chess with him. He wasn't a bad guy, the prison, you know, guard, and he brought him a box of a life-size woman, of like an actual woman, like a robotic woman. And at the end of the Ben, Chris, do you remember this episode at all?
Or should I sort of remember it, but
at the end of the episode, he didn't want to leave the woman. At the beginning of the episode, he hated her. And at the end, in order to get him to come back to Earth, he was pardoned. They shot the woman, and they brought him back. But that's not a bad idea, Lewis.
Right. Well, it's just between the duration and the exposure to radiation. It's so you're putting rocket boosters on people in solitary.
Yeah.
But in reading about the original run of the Twilight Zone, I found an episode that I am going to watch after we do this recording, and it's called The Quarry, and it's from 1961, and it's about, it says here, religious apostate repeats the same question to a maniacal, deranged attorney.
You're such a okay. It's
starting with the words, "Don't you think?" So I'm looking forward to watching that one.
Thank you very much, Lewis. Fine. And another one I loved was Silence. Ben, this was Chris. This was an amazing episode. They were at a very famous, prominent club, and there was a guy like Lewis that would always talk. And the guy offered him. He made him a bet that for a year, for $1 million, he couldn't speak. And he kept on the whole time trying to get this guy to speak, and he wouldn't speak. And the guy that made the offer, it's revealed that he's going broke, that he doesn't have the $1 million. But the big reveal is that the only way the guy couldn't speak was he cut his own vocal cords out.
Right.
And I remember seeing that going, oh my, I mean, that it was just a brilliant episode. And, you know, as we're talking about, you know, the last, I mean, there's just so many remarkable episodes. And Lewis, I really do think you and your daughter would gain a lot by watching some Twilight Zone.
I agree, and a serious point, because I think this was unintentional. I don't know. Maybe it was unintentional. So in the Twilight Zone, the movie, the prologue with Albert Brooks and Dan Aykroyd, which I think is that prologue is excellent.
Yeah.
It speaks to, again, intentionally or not, a problem that, in my opinion, continues to plague the Twilight Zone, where and Aykroyd are going back and forth talking about favorite episodes, and Aykroyd saying, no, I think that was
Outer Limits.
The Outer Limits. I think to this day, people, it's not so much that they confuse episodes with other shows. It's the mischaracterization or misperception of the Twilight Zone is either science fiction or sci-fi horror, when it has some of those elements in some episodes, but it's not a horror show and it's not a science fiction series. And it's that lack of clarification that continues to plague it. And I think it may be one of the reasons why the attempts to remake the show in the 80s and now again with Jordan Peele have been unsuccessful despite the quality of writing and directing.
That actually is a very good point, Lewis. Thank you. And so, Chris, you remember absolutely no Twilight Zone episodes. You didn't do your homework.
I do know, but I do have a good factoid about Rod Serling.
Please do tell.
Jewish. until he wanted to get married, at which point he converted to Unitarianism.
Okay, let's
That's
pause
weird.
for a moment. The nominees for most eloquent restatement of the obvious are Dennis Prager, Chris Kirk, and a man on a bench.
Kevin James.
And the award goes to hold on, Chris Buzzkirk from the house somewhere in Arizona that he broke into. Rod Serling.
I did not realize that it was obvious that he had converted to Unitarianism. Because
I didn't know that either, by the way.
I didn't know the telltale signs of Unitarians.
Just so you
Next
know,
that he was Jewish. Next, you'll tell me that Woody Allen's neurotic.
Chris, just so you know, Lewis is Jewish. Lewis is Jewish, but he's jealous of your esoteric fact that you beat him in the.
Well, everybody no, it's not so much that he converted to Unitarianism; it's that Rod Serling was a Jew.
No, the Unitarianism is the story.
Oh,
right.
Oh,
because why? Because
hashtag
what? You converted to Unitarianism because what?
So,
you didn't want to just go to brunch on Sunday instead?
Translation: Reformed Jew becomes very reformed.
I don't even know what you. By the way, just for the people like me, Chris, why don't you tell people what Unitarianism is?
It's where you go if you're too guilty about not going to church instead of going to brunch.
It's
modern brunch.
Go ahead, Lewis, and then
modern
go ahead, Ben.
day, and I don't say this critically. It's modern day deism.
Okay.
All right. Does that make sense, Chris?
I sort of, but I think I'm not even sure it's that anymore. Like it sort of started as that, and now I think it's just kind of a social club where you get together.
Now it's a meeting place
for older hippie ladies.
Well, it's a meeting place to coordinate protests.
Yeah,
so we'll meet there, and then we'll figure out the logistics when we go in front of the federal building on Wilshire.
If you want to know where Alex P. Keaton's parents are on Sunday mornings, it's there.
Ah, okay. You know what? That's a great. I love how we have to go back to the 80s. Like we are so not current that we're going to Family Ties to describe a certain type of religion. You know, next you'll be telling me like you'll go to the Wonder Years to. By the way, just so you know, best pilot show ever, best first episode of a show ever made.
Well, see, I don't know. My best first episode is the Rockford Files.
Okay, you see, this is a whole different discussion. We'll save this for next week.
Two words, cop rock.
Cop Rock is amazing.
Exactly. When I first saw Cop Rock, of which they did, I think, 4 episodes.
Yep.
When the jury got up and just broke out into song, gold.
I had 2 full weeks of college courses on Cop Rock. Oh. I had a professor who was so into Cop Rock. That's all we watched and discussed for TV studies.
You know what, by the way, it's a fascinating thing that Lewis and producer girlfriend, you should look into this. First of all, that it really only lasted 4 episodes.
No, I don't know.
Yeah. Whatever it lasted. Think about the casting people, how much work they had to go and do. They had to find people that could look like a cop, that could sing and dance. That's not an easy,
And it came.
I will bring more Cop Rock information to our next episode of our very first episodes. So,
okay, Ben, I'll give you one last chance. How did the Twilight Zone save your life?
How did the Twilight Zone save my life?
Or help your life?
Well, I think mainly what it did was introduced me to excellent stories. Stories that I hadn't read or seen before. It was a different kind of writing. So many of those episodes were adapted for television from literature, whether it was magazine short stories or
There was one he paid 25 grand for.
Which one was that? I don't remember.
Lewis, if you could look that up, which episode?
Am I the only one with an internet connection?
Yes, you
Well-
are. You're the only one that I'm not sure what they're doing during the show. Okay, so
Right.
I know your hands are whatever, but Chris, Ben, that is a great point. It created a generation of wondering thinkers.
I think, think about it this way too. So, a lot of the sort of the first generation of television was influenced by radio, but a lot of that was influenced by literature. In the same way that Sunday morning or Saturday morning cartoons, Looney Tunes and things introduced a generation to great music, classical music.
And on that note, we are going to take a break, but after the break, we're going to get a little away from the Twilight Zone to a subject that Chris Buzzkirk holds so dearly to his heart. What character on a TV show did you want to be like the most? So you are listening to the Four Esoterics. We'll be back in a few seconds after Ben Boychuk gives us an advertisement on something.
Well, I want to say another word or two about American Greatness. If you're not subscribing to our newsletter, you're missing out, and you're certainly missing out if you're not checking in every morning and reading Liz Sheld's Morning Greatness, in which our news editor, Liz, compiles all of the most important sort of stories of the day that if you're not aware of, and she brings great wit and humor to it. Check us out online. If you're watching this, you might be watching this on American Greatness, but you might also be hearing it on iTunes or on YouTube. But check it out, www.amgreatness.com. Liz Sheld's Morning Greatness. It's definitely must reading.
And by the way, I want to say Chris is an exceptional tweeter. I don't want to get political because you tweeted something last night that was absolutely brilliant.
What was it?
I don't want to get political, so I don't want people. Where do they find?
So much to choose from on my last night's.
No, but just say your
go back and look.
Say your Twitter handle so people know.
At the Chris Buskirk.
And
use the definite article.
And like it. It's a great tweet. And I'm not sure where Lou.
Actually, I have a few questions if you don't mind.
Please.
Ben, what age were you when you started watching the Twilight Zone?
Probably 7 or 8.
7 or 8. And Chris, why weren't you interested in the Twilight Zone? Was there something else that you were watching? Because I think it's very interesting that we have two people here. One who's kind of diehard and one who
is blasé.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like I would like it. I just think it's just one of those things I just sort of missed.
Here's the better question: did you have cable as did you have cable as a kid? There was no cable, right?
Well, we were just happy that we had running water.
I didn't have cable, by the way. So
cable. Cable in the 80s wasn't cable. Now you got like a movie channel, literally,
right.
And then it wasn't until later that you started to get WGN and that type of stuff. So it was basically the reruns on the local channel. That's where that was. Right. That's where, at least here in Phoenix, that's where that was played.
In New York, the same thing. That is a great question, though. What was it that didn't get you in, and what was it that got you in? And I mean,
I did not. I'd like, just to be clear, it's not like I watched it and rejected it. Like it just never happened.
Right. It was like, for me, growing up an observant Jew, I didn't watch anything on Saturday morning. So when people talk about Saturday morning cartoons or Saturday morning whatever was on, I didn't watch it. I didn't get it.
Well, TV was fire. You didn't have that.
That's exactly right. So Chris's interesting point to top this off is, what characters growing up or even today on television did you want to emulate? Did you want to be like? And I posed this question to Lewis, and I can't tell if he was joking or not with his selection of 4, or he was actually being serious. So Lewis,
no, I was being totally serious. I said Huggy Bear, Rerun, Wonder Woman, and Magnum.
So you didn't want to be with Wonder Woman. You wanted to be Wonder Woman.
No, I'd like to have that body and just, enjoy myself for a few hours.
That's an interesting take. And what about Rerun? What was you wanted?
Rerun.
You just wanted to eat as much as possible.
No, this is between the Robin Williams Mork-like suspenders, the beret.
Yeah, he was great. They in those days when they stereotyped, they really they didn't hold any stereotype back.
And I'm Facebook friends with Raj, who is a very, and I say this in a complimentary way, he's a very observant Christian. But here's my Raj impersonation from What's Happening, which was the TV adaptation of Cooley High, a film wholly divorced from the TV show, both in time and theme. Here's my Raj. Here's my Raj impersonation. Remember when he'd laugh?
Yeah, I thought it was just going to be Dwayne.
Hi.
Okay, Chris, what about you? Since you can name 10, so go for it.
Oh, well, 10-year-old me, here they are. Hawkeye Pierce from MASH.
Yep.
I mean, what's better than that? Like, you get to be like a smartass all the time. You've got a still in your tent. And I wanted to be a doctor at the time. And so then when you were working, like you were being a surgeon. And
I can drink.
That was pretty cool.
But
I can drink during
friend?
Surgery.
But
what?
I could have a martini and perform.
That was totally fine during the Korean War.
But who was a better friend to you? Who was a better friend to you?
Found the idea of watching Alan Alda for a half hour as punishment.
But who was a better friend to you, by the way? Was it Wayne Rogers or the other guy, Mike Farrell or whatever his name is?
Wayne Rogers for sure.
God rest his soul, who used to be on FBN in the mornings on Saturdays. He was amazing.
Brad.
Yeah, that's right.
You did another Labyrinth. It's Mike Farrell, not Mike Farrell.
Let me just say this:
when I knew him, it was Farrell.
I want to watch the screen. They got Mike Farrell on.
Lewis, relax. Chris, go on.
Oh god.
So Hawkeye.
Yes, we got that.
Number two, Quincy. Again, this keeps with the doctor theme. And he lived on a boat.
Yeah, that's a good question. What was his first name?
Nobody knows.
He was like
murder.
Yeah.
Murder
was the heart.
He just was Quincy. That's it. Just you could see.
He wanted to be Quincy. Who were the sidekicks on that show? Weren't there like one or two?
The token Oriental, the Chinaman who did all the work. He solved all the crimes, and then Quincy in his sweater, in his V-neck sweater, would show up with LAPD and they'd arrest the guy.
And we have to make this announcement. Lewis in no way represents anything from American greatness. He is affiliated on his own, and we don't know where he lives. So go on. So those two.
Yeah, those were the two big ones. I alluded to this earlier, like Rockford. Rockford was a good one. He, again, lived in
post-prison,
on the beach.
Post-prison. You didn't want to be in prison.
No,
by the governor.
That was uncomfortable.
Yeah. Sorry, Lewis?
Rockford was released from prison. He had been wrongfully convicted, and he received a pardon from the governor. And don't forget the crossover with the character of Lance, the high-end PI, played by Tom Selleck, pre-Magnum.
Oh, that's
exactly
right.
Did forget that. What about you, Ben?
Oh, let's see. Walter White.
That's extremely interesting.
No, not really, but everybody, you look like Walter White. No. Great character, but I wouldn't want to.
You don't want to be making math.
I didn't want to be that. No.
How about Heisenberg? The alter ego.
Right. Yeah. No, I would have picked Hawkeye Pierce.
And that's why you two have such great synergy.
Yeah, that's right. That's why we work.
Hawkeye Pierce.
That's why we work well together. I also would have.
And we both have a still where we make our bathtub gym.
Right.
What about? I'm interested in producer girlfriend because as a woman, I want to know who she looked up to or wanted to be like on television. Please, not Meredith Baxter Burney.
Angie Dickinson.
That's a good one.
I really liked this show, Clarissa Explains It All, and I just thought she was so cool.
I don't know
She
what that
always-
is.
I've never heard of this show. What
How
is
about
it?
explaining it to us?
No, I'm not going to explain it to you guys. It was a show on cable, and since my mom had cable and my dad didn't have cable, I only got to see it at my mom's house.
Love that it doesn't have a network. It's just called cable.
Yeah,
You can find it
it
on
was.
cable.
I'm
I
trying to
have-
think of what I think it was either on Nickelodeon. I'm gonna have to look this up because
They didn't even have Nickelodeon when all of us were younger.
They did.
Nickelodeon was but a dream. So, anyways, is there anybody else that
it was on Nickelodeon.
See, she has somebody political that she looks up to, but it's not in a political way who's on TV all the time.
I'm a giant fan of Deborah Burks. I have a huge lady crush on her for so many reasons. I mean, I could go surface and say that woman just has the most amazing collection of Hermes scarves. I mean, there's a whole Instagram dedicated to the scarves that woman wears, and you can buy them, and it's amazing. But I mean, I'm just like a huge fan of hers just because of the science that she's brought and what she brings to the table and how she tells people and men no. I like
and just
that.
so you know, by the way, my favorite thing is with her liking her, she doesn't mind me watching press briefings. So I get the best of both worlds out of that.
I don't even know who this woman is.
Do you live under a rock?
Yes, he does. Do you have to ask?
Was she on the Rockford Files?
Was she on the Rockford Files?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll end up on mine because Chris actually amazingly guessed that I wanted to be like Dan Tana, Private Eye, and I wanted to live under, was it the Tropicana Hotel in Vegas?
Yeah.
And have a Thunderbird, right?
A Thunderbird, yeah.
Yeah, and have Tony Curtis as my boss. I literally was my dream job was to live under a casino in Vegas and be the head of security for the casino. And I also, I would dress the temple like Ken Wall from Wise Guy. And I loved those shows, like The Equalizer. I wanted to be The
I
Equalizer.
secretly wanted to be Italian.
But Ken Wall, oddly enough, was Jewish, just as Sephardic
He's not
Jew.
Jewish.
What?
He's not Jewish.
Yes, he is.
I've done extensive research.
No, you haven't. I haven't seen you type one.
And his wife
Is one of the
Barbie
twins.
twins.
Yes, I didn't
That's
say.
Really?
Okay, here's the thing. We're not saying we want to be these people in real life. We're saying we want to be like them on television. You think I loved Airwolf. You think I wanted to have Jan Michael Vincent's life?
First of all, you're the Ernest Borgnine on that helicopter.
100%, 100%. And I'm going to tell you, I shared this with Ben a couple weeks ago. I was at a party years ago, and Ernest Borgnine was there, and I said to my friend Tony, I said, "Do you think it would be okay if I walked up to him?" So he said, "Of course." So I walk up to him and I say, "I could have picked 100 movies he was in, Oscar-winning movies." And I said, "I just have to tell you, I know I loved you on Airwolf." And he looked at me and he goes, "Thank you so much." I go, "Can I take a picture?" And he said, I sat down next to him and he said to me, "Just say the F word before we take the picture." And I go, "Why the F word?" He goes, "Because it always makes people smile." So, and I got to take a picture with him and it did make me smile. And on that note, we are running out of time.
I'd just like to say on Ernest Borgnine, McHale's Navy, we can't let him pass his name pass without talking about his excellent work on McHale's Navy.
He was an exceptional actor.
He was a great actor.
It was just Dirty was which one was he in? Was it the Dirty Dozen or was it the Greatest? He was in the Dirty Dozen, wasn't he?
Dirty Dozen, I think.
Yeah, he was in the Dirty Dozen. Just exceptional actor. Him and Martin Balsam and Jack Warden.
Right. But you as the Borgnine character on Airwolf, I could see you saying like, I gotta pee. Can you land this thing?
100%. Louis, 100%. I agree with you. Did you ever figure out the Lee Marvin movie?
No, I'm on Ken Wall now.
Oh God. Okay. So I want everybody to join us live Friday. Hopefully we will have a surprise guest, but I shouldn't have said Friday. We could edit that out. I want everybody to join us on our next podcast where we'll be discussing 80s music, 80s bands. Chris, does that work for you?
Love it.
Ben, work for you?
No, but I'll make it work somehow.
What do you mean? You had Ozzy.
I know, it's fine. I'm kidding around.
Okay, we're gonna yeah. Haha. And Lewis, does that work for you? 80s music? Were you listening to it at all in the 80s?
Yeah, I was very into Run DMC.
And Aerosmith. So I want to thank American AM Greatness. That's amgreatness.com. You could find us where, Ben?
Well, you can find us on Twitter at the 4 Esoterics at numeral 4 Esoterics, ESOTERICS. And of course, American Greatness is on Twitter as well. The AM Greatness at the AM Greatness. Whoops.
And Buzzkirk, where can people find you and your exceptional?
My exceptional tweets at the Chris Buskirk.
Lewis, where can people find you? We don't want to know.
I'm at
the corner
wherever stool softeners are sold.
And you see here, by the way, I just want to end with this. Here's the problem when you text Lewis, and everybody here could attest to this. You never know what text is coming next. I don't know how we got into the conversation the other night about Colace or laxatives.
Oh, we're trying to find Senecot.
Lewis starts sending me pictures of bottles of stool softeners. Thank you so much, Lewis. And
no, it was based on you explaining to me that someone near and dear to you has a problem.
Yes, somebody that is not in my house. It's not producer girlfriend.
Right.
And we always I really want to say, let's give a big thanks to producer girlfriend. She spends so much time uploading and making this all possible because, as Lewis said, if it wasn't for producer girlfriend, him and I would just be screaming from a corner.
There would be soup cans and cave drawings.
And that's the truth. So thank you, producer girlfriend. You do an amazing job.
Thank you.
And thanks for naming some of those amazing shows that bring back memories like, you can't believe.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to the 4 Esoterics. Thank you.